Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this chapter introduction video for chapters 13 and 14. In these chapters of our textbook, we're covering campaigns, elections, and parties. Now, I've had a few different textbooks that pair these up or separate these out or don't separate them. And so I just thought we'd tackle both these subjects together, but really it's about campaigns and elections and how political parties shape those things. And I think you probably have an instinct, if you've followed politics at all, that political parties are competing in a campaign and an election, and they're competing very specifically for your vote. That's the entire purpose of political parties. They exist to win elections. So it makes sense to discuss these topics together, and I think what you're going to find is that it really is a dog-eat-dog world. Let's go ahead and check it out, starting with three key concepts you're going to want to know. First of all, a huge emphasis on the AP test is voter turnout. You're going to want to identify the factors that decrease voter turnout in the United States. Now, a lot of these are about things that prevent people from voting, or especially if someone's disengaged, but it can also mean differences among racial and ethnic groups, and even among gender in terms of participation with the vote. You want to be able to describe modern campaigns, more specifically, the stages of a modern campaign. How are those campaigns run? How are they paid for? This is something that your textbook is probably going to go into a lot of detail in, so maybe make a timeline or have some way of organizing what happens at each stage of a campaign. Next, you're going to want to talk about why third parties lose. We all know that in the United States of America, we have a two-party system, but we don't all necessarily understand why those third parties struggle so much. There's a lot of different reasons on this. Just a couple of things I would point you to are the winner-take-all system, particularly in the Electoral College, single-member districts, and the incumbency advantage. You want to be able to tie all of those back to the structural barriers that third parties face. Two similar concepts you're going to want to compare and contrast, because the AP test is going to expect you to know both of them, is the general or presidential election, and be able to contrast that with the midterm elections, right? We know the general or presidential elections happen every 4 years, but in between those presidential elections, every 2 years, there is a midterm election where only members of Congress are up. And this does a lot of wonky things to voter turnout, to who actually votes, but also to things like incumbency advantage, to coattails. There's so much to be said about the differences between these two. So make sure you're not only fluent with these vocab words, but that you know what it really means for candidates and elections. And lastly, the chapter mantra. Elections are a man-made system with pros and cons. This is one of the first and most important things I always tell my students. Elections, we often have grown up in America. We're used to this system. We think it is the way you do it. Everything about our elections, from how you vote to when we vote to what exactly that looks like when we're showing the results of the vote. But all of these things are the result of choices made by people. Like everything in our government, the way we run elections is a man-made system, and there are different ways to do it. In fact, most countries around the world do it immensely differently than us. So we want to think about the system that we do have, not only to talk about how great or terrible it is, but to be able to talk about both the pros and cons. You could see maybe an essay question, maybe about something like the Electoral College coming your way. Can you really describe, okay, how does that system work? What are the pros of it, and what are the cons of it? So just to review again, you're going to want to make sure you identify factors, particularly that decrease voter turnout. You want to be able to describe the steps or the stages or the moments of modern campaigns. And you want to be able to explain why third parties struggle in the United States. For your two things to compare, make sure you can compare the general, or sometimes called the presidential elections, with the midterm elections. And finally, remember that chapter mantra. Elections are a man-made system with pros and cons. Just like anything else in government, it's a system made by the choices of people, and those choices have consequences, some good and some bad. Thanks for tuning in today. I wish you the best of luck on this chapter. Have a good one.